Work is the means to the end. The end is doing things that give me passion, spending time with my friends, developing a community that is about things that I'm passionate about.
Well, hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm Sam Hind, I'm your host, and I am super excited to bring you this episode today because it helps to answer one of the questions I think I get asked most by companies in the direct selling industry, and that is, how do we attract some of the newer and younger generations to our industry to keep it growing? And there is no better person for me to pull in to have this conversation than the incredible Heather Chastain, founder of the Bridgehead Collective. Heather is a seasoned professional with over 28 years of experience in the direct selling industry. She's worked in various roles for companies. She's also served on the board of directors for the DSA and comes to this industry with a wealth of experience. But she recognized the inevitability of a significant shift in the industry. And so she started Bridgehead Collective with the aim of helping everyone in the channel navigate the changing landscape and making pivotal choices for the future. Most importantly, her passion lies in helping companies and field leaders to see the bigger picture and helps them to embrace data-driven solutions. In other words, Heather has done the research. She has worked out what makes the different generations tick, what language they want to use, and most importantly, how to share the message of this incredible industry to younger generations who don't have the same knowledge and experience in this industry that maybe those seasoned people like many of our listeners today do. So if you're wondering, how can I attract a younger generation? What do I need to say? What do I need to do? I know you're going to find this episode fascinating. Heather shares some insights from the data that they've pulled from the incredible research that they have done, how they have identified what shifts and changes have happened, what is different, and how we need to talk about this channel maybe a little bit differently in the coming times. So, with all of that said, I'm going to hand over now to my interview with the amazing, beautiful, and incredibly inspiring Heather Chastain. Enjoy the episode. Well, hello there and welcome back into the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm so excited to have you joining us today, and I am over the moon excited to be chatting with the amazing Heather Chastain, founder and CEO of Bridgehead Collective. Welcome on in, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Oh, look, it's such an honor, and I was so privileged to be able to actually meet and chat with you in person a few weeks ago. It feels like yesterday, by the way, but
Insane.
You came all the way over to Australia. Was that your first time in the land down under?
It's really my first time that I've explored. I have the claim to fame of having gone to Australia for a weekend from the States. I do not recommend. I was actually in the air 1 hour longer than I was on the ground for that particular trip. I cannot remember now why it was so important that I get back. I assume it had something to do with one of my little ones. But
it's either kids or marriage, one of those two things.
It was kids. It would have been kids. That's a whole other story. It would have been kids. But I flew in, flew out. That was about 10 years ago. And so this last time we spent almost 2 weeks there. So it was a really good time to get out.
So I feel like if you do a fly in, fly out like that, you don't get on the time zone, do you? You kind of just go, I'm just going to stay with the US time zone so that I don't. That's almost like escaping. It always feels like, well, there's got to be a positive to doing such a quick trip, right? But there would have been no jet lag for that trip.
No, you can't. Your body doesn't even have time to figure it out. By the time you get back, it's just like you had a really crazy weekend. And then you're like, oh, well.
Just a little hungover. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. Okay. I do have a few speaking friends that do that. They fly into the US and out, and they don't stay for longer than 48 hours max, but usually 24. And then they get out and they come back so that they don't have to do that, because they will speak at 3 or 4 events in a week, including the US. So it's got to kind of work in. I really feel like that makes me feel better. People call you busy, you're like, oh, there's busier. I think that's crazy, Heather, but I'm glad that you got to explore.
It was great. But I was really glad to come. And the fun thing about doing business in the US and Australia is if you don't need to sleep, you actually can cover both markets completely well. It's truly a 24-hour cycle. It's lovely. Like, it's super efficient.
That's hilarious. So what was your favorite part of Australia? Tell me your favorite part and the part that surprised you the most.
Oh, gosh. I think my favorite part really was the people. Like, everywhere we went, it was really such a laid back, chill environment. Like, I wore my flip flops everywhere we went, and that was like A-okay with everybody. Yes. So like that, I'm sorry, yes, thongs. So that's something different here. So that, I think I just really liked the sort of, at least everywhere we went, it was just a super relaxed sort of vibe. And that was really lovely. I think what surprised me the most, and this will sound so American, but it was the vastness. Like, it's such a big country, which we know from being in the States is so big too, right? But it was just, and in talking to people, such a different identity with each parts of the nation. Anyway, that was super interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about this as well when we caught up, because one of the things that, Scott and Angel were here as well from the US. A lot of our listeners know them, and they also made the comment that everyone here just talks to everybody. And I said, that's the thing we found really interesting about the US is, depending on where you go, it's not as welcome to just say hi to a stranger, or people do think kind of like why are you talking to me? Whereas here it's considered rude if you don't. If you're in a lineup at a shop, or even the friendly wave to the car, that you're passing, this is normal Australian behavior. And so the question you ask when people don't wave and say hi is what's wrong? What's going on?
And it was good I travel with my brother. My brother is a much more of an extrovert than I am, and he will talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere.
And he would have loved it.
Beautifully. The other thing really quick that I was surprised with was how well versed Australians were in US politics. Like, super up to speed. I mean, I understand we're crazy, so it's sort of like a train wreck situation of
I feel like it kind of just is a drama and an excitement, because I mean, our politics are really boring in comparison.
Well, comparatively, that's what we give. That's what we give the world.
like it is. I think it's kind of a very interesting thing that a celebrity has become a president and is now trying to become president again. I think that there's something really abnormal to an Australian about that, because I don't feel like celebrities would do so well in Australia in politics. It's just, I think it just fascinates people.
It was fascinating.
Yeah. But we're not here to talk about all of that. So I'm glad that you had a great time. But I would love to hear, just as we get stuck into this podcast, you have got such an incredibly diverse background. And the conversation we're going to have today, I think, is going to be an insanely valuable one. I think people are going to walk away from this and go, oh, my goodness, I'm so glad I now know that stuff. And like every time I hear you speak, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. I love this. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and what's led you to where you are today as founder and CEO of Bridgehead Collective. And on that, we'd also love to know a little bit more about Bridgehead Collective. So that's a lot of questions all in one, but I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I have it's funny, I've always just put my head down and done good work, right? Like, I've always focused on the job at hand. I never really had a big grand plan for my career or goals I wanted to. I was never really wired that way. I always felt like if you show up and you do really good work and you care passionately about what it is that you're doing and you put your whole heart into it, that good things will happen. And that's really sort of how my meandering sort of path led. I actually didn't even start out in this industry. My very first job was working in cost accounting for a stainless steel manufacturing company, believe it or not. And what I loved doing was I love manufacturing. I love being on the shop floor making stuff. And so I got this company to hire me to be the production manager on the lipstick manufacturing line for a company called Beauty Control Cosmetics, which was a US-based direct selling company. And I had no idea it was direct selling. I didn't know what direct selling was. I don't think my mom had so much as a Tupperware party growing up. Like I just didn't know anything about it, but I wanted to make stuff. And I found somebody that hired me to do that. And we were at our first convention, and my job, I was the forklift driver. I unloaded the trucks, unloaded the trucks. I was all back in, all operations. And I was cutting through the ballroom one day where the big Salesforce convention was going on, like we've all now been to dozens and dozens of times. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman standing on stage talking about how this experience had completely changed how she saw herself. And I was just like dead stopped in my tracks. And I had no idea how what we did helped make that happen for her. But I knew that moment that I needed to know more about it. She was standing on stage and she said, I never, ever thought that I could do anything. But my leader believed in me. And look at me now. And she had this look on her face. I get goosebumps every single time. She had this look on her face of like joy and triumph. And it was, and I was like, I don't know what we did, but I need to learn more about it. And next day we go back to the home office, and I went from the manufacturing building, walked over to the founder and CEO of the company and said something horrible like, hi, I've worked here about a year and I just figured out what we do and I'd like to learn more about it. Can you teach me, please? And that's when I started learning about this incredible industry that we're all a part of. And I learned about compensation plans, and I learned about marketing, and I learned about sales, and I learned about inspiration. I learned about motivation, and I learned about all of the hard, like how hard it is to do what our sales leaders do. And that started my career. And I started just had this great opportunity to work in lots of different facets of the business and manufacturing, like I said, and operations and marketing and sales and leadership. And I just started to just embrace the whole picture and loved it, and loved the lives that I was contributing in some small way to changing, and seeing people grow and develop and their self-esteem blossom. And like, that's what really drives me, is helping people feel better about themselves. And so that went on for, 20 something years, because I'm super old. And about 4 years ago, I was with an incredible company, 70-year-old company, US brand. And I just started to feel like I could perhaps be more influential on the channel as a whole if I stepped out of one company and started a firm that was designed to help companies innovate and make some pivotal decisions, because this industry is changing rapidly. And I recognized that not all companies were as courageous as I would have liked them to be about embracing that change and talking to our fields with respect and trust and equality, and believing that we can tell them hard things, and we can tackle hard things together and bring innovation in a way that we haven't had to historically, and all those things. And so, I founded a company called Bridgehead Collective. And I will say, in one of the more gratifying moments of my career, I went to the owner of the company that I was part of at the time. I was their chief strategy officer, had been president of their North America market, and told him what I was doing. And I think he might have. He swore, and then he said, well, gosh, we'd love to be your first client. And they're actually still a client today. So that was like a lovely piece. And since I started that 4 years ago, we created this group of people who are talented and in all different facets of the business. We all have had P&L responsibility. We all have stood in front of fields and delivered good news and bad news and all the news in between. And so we just come alongside leadership teams and companies and sort of help craft this vision for the future. Yeah. That's really what drives us.
Yeah, amazing. And so given, the background that you have, and my goodness, have you had some experience in so many, and I think there's very few people in leadership roles in this industry that understand so many different facets of the business, by the way. Mm-hmm. So it's a really special thing that you've got all of that experience. But I'd love to know how you see, or what you see as being the biggest challenge for the direct selling industry right now, because you've obviously stepped into this space because you're passionate about seeing the industry grow and you want to see change. What do you think is kind of that looming, if we don't adapt or change, this is going to get us? Like, what's the biggest shift that we're seeing at the moment? And
yeah. It's sort of a complicated question, actually, Sam. It sounds like a simple question, but it's pretty nuanced. I think the easy answer, and what you hear a lot of people say, is like the external regulators and all of that noise. And I actually don't believe that that's our existential threat. I believe that the biggest thing that we have to figure out, how to navigate, is the next generation's perception of leadership and how they want to spend their time. Fundamentally, our industry is built on this business model of team building, right? And historically, it's also been built on this beautiful merging of community, socializing, and economy, right? So people, men and women, majority women, but men and women, can come together in this environment that we create with our companies and the channel, and sort of merge all these things together, experience leadership like they never have before. They get to sort of put all of these business skills to work and build teams and provide leadership and coaching and organization and structure and calls and blah, blah, and all that. And the challenges in the research, we can get into the research if you want to at some point, but we did some independent research to sort of validate and understand what the next generation is looking for from this channel. And it echoed what I'm saying, which is the next generation, younger millennials in particular, just don't want to build teams and have their organizations structured in the way that we have historically. Nor do they want a blending of their fun life, their social life, and the way they make money. They don't want those to mix. They really want them separate. And those two things combined, I think, represent a pretty fundamental shift in what our business looks like in 3 years' time, 5 years' time. And unless we adapt to that and accommodate it, I do think that's going to be our biggest challenge.
That's a really interesting one, because it's very different. If you look at, and I'm an old millennial, so I'm kind of like just on the cusp there. I'm going to take it because it makes me sound younger than what I feel like I really am. We're going to go with that. So the thing is that from my generation and up, there is a merging together of what I do for work and my family friends, my social connections. So what you're saying is that those younger generations actually want to separate that. It's a very different mentality. And I guess now that you say that and you think about the way that you see them operating on social media, they've often got two completely separate, it's almost like two separate lives, two separate worlds going on, right?
100%. And we're talking about really like lower 30s, younger 30s and below, like that age. So people in their 20s are really that younger millennial crowd right now, right? And often they'll have separate Instagram accounts, right? Separate TikTok accounts. Often even within business, they'll have separate channels for different focuses, right? And that's partly because they don't want those worlds colliding. But there's very much a view, and it has to do with work-life balance is what it has to do with, right? They're looking at older millennials, and certainly my Gen Xers, right? We did it really well, where we didn't have the boundaries, right? It was all in, everything was blended. The work from home really sort of started. The cell phone, we're the cell phone generation for work, right? This is when we went from you leave the office and you leave the office to you never leave the office because the office follows you, right? Phones have a very different meaning for the younger generations than they do mine. And they see that and they react to that. And they're like, no, work is the means to an end. It is not the end in and of itself. Work is the means to the end. The end is doing things that give me passion, spending time with my friends, developing a community that is about things that I'm passionate about. And interestingly, rarely are they passionate about things that cause an income to come to your house, right? Whereas our generations, and I'll generously include you in mine because then I'll feel younger too. But like older millennials and Xers definitely feel like work is an end as well. Maybe not the end, but an end.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we're going to get into this generational talk because I think it's a big topic, especially with social media right now, and of course the way that the different generations are also absorbing the information that they're seeing. But I just want to ask a big question here. one of the things that I think we assume, and a lot of companies are saying, oh, we get calls, I would say every week, from companies saying, help us to get the younger generations, help us to promote to the younger generations. There's this assumption that they have to do things a particular way with the younger generations because of the stereotype of this industry. But I've got to ask you this question. I know you and I have got the perception, we're aware of the perception problem of the industry because of the old days. We're not going to name any companies, but, you go to dinner at someone's house. I remember my parents doing this. They go to dinner at someone's house and then halfway through the meal, the whiteboard gets wheeled out.
Yeah.
The old typical, if anyone's in the industry, they're going to be, doing everything they can to sell to me. That's not the way that this industry is now. And that's unfortunately a very small portion, of course, of experiences were like that. But they created a perception.
Yeah.
The thing I've got to know, because I think a lot of people assume the younger generations have got this same perception, what is their perception of the direct selling industry in comparison to what yours and mine might be, which we're trying to reshape?
Yeah.
Is it the same?
It's not. It's not. And actually, I decided to do this research, I heard a man named Jason Dorsey speak on Gen Z, and he's sort of known as the Gen Z whisperer, really focused on Gen Z. And I wanted to understand how all generations, I wasn't trying to say, how do we attract the younger generation? I was trying to say, how are there different ways that each generation perceives this industry, is interested in this industry, feels about the industry, and then if they do engage, are there differences in how we can talk about onboarding and what amount of money makes a difference? So we did this whole 50-point research study. It was hugely comprehensive. And what we found is that there are radical differences in how each generation perceives the channel. And the subtitle of the book that's not yet written is They Don't Hate Us, right? Because I think going in, there's a perception. There's a perception that the younger generation, like we're fighting against it, that they just don't like what we have. And the analogy that I use in talking with groups of field leaders in particular, and I think your audience will find this interesting, is if you think about what we offer, this is a little trite, so hang with me. But if you think about what we offer as a cupcake that we have wrapped in a gift box and are giving to someone, what the younger millennials will say is they love every single thing about the cupcake. They love the batter, they love the flavor, they love the frosting, they love the decoration, they love the creativity, they love they love everything about the cupcake. And they absolutely cannot stand the box that we are giving it to them in. They don't like the wrapping paper, they don't like the shape, they don't like the size, they don't like what we call it, they don't like what we write on the gift tag. Nothing. Now, the reason that's really good news is that younger millennials in particular, in this research of Gen Z all the way through Gen X, younger millennials, that sort of 25 in sort of 25, 35 range, right? They stood out as disproportionately more positively attuned to wanting to be part of this industry than any other generation. No matter what we call it, like they were like, yes, I am in, because they really, really want what it is that we offer. We offer the opportunity to add an additional income stream to their household. We offer them a trusted guide to walk with them every step of the way, right? These are things they want. Now, do they want to be their own boss and have an opportunity and have an upline and a sponsor? They do not, right? Yeah. To a listening ear, those are exactly the same thing, but they're heard very, very, very differently. So for many cases, it's not what we're offering, which I think is what we were sort of thinking before. It's just how we're presenting it and how we're talking about it.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess then becomes the assumption of that's how I also have to offer it to other people, and I don't feel comfortable sharing it that way. So, one of the things that you mentioned before is, that younger millennial generation that we're talking about here, that for them, their work is not something that becomes a part of their life. Their work is a means to an end. Mm-hmm. How does that fit when for a lot of people in the direct selling industry, typically are really super passionate about what they do? They really believe in what they do. How does that shift? How does that need to change for that younger generation that's looking at this as an income producing activity that's separate to the rest of their life?
Yeah, and don't let me misspeak about what I mean in terms of a means to an end. You can still be incredibly passionate about what it is that you're doing. It's just not that's not what life is about. Okay. So I want to do this for my income, and I may have multiple income streams, right? And we'll talk about that in a second, because I think it's super interesting that the sort of the enemy of the younger generations is not the boring 9 to 5 chained to the cubicle kind of thing like we thought it was, or I thought it was. It's really all your eggs in one basket. It's one income stream, right? That's what they're fighting against. So it's not that they're not passionate about having multiple income streams. And the biggest misconception is of sort of the work ethic. Huge work ethic among younger millennials and Gen Zs. Not afraid to work at all. They're just simply saying work is work, and my free time and my pleasure and my enjoyment is something separate. And I am going to have a line between the two, and I am going to value each of them separately, but with energy and equality, right? Whereas I do think my generation in particular probably went too far the other way, devalued prioritizing self-care, personal time, mental health, all of that, with the pursuit of whatever this was. They're just saying, I can love what I do. We're not asking, they're not dispassionate by any stretch. Not at all. It's simply, this is why I do this. It's to pay for my life. This is my life.
Interesting. I feel like this is like we're at the start of the rabbit hole here, and there's all of these tunnels we can go down today.
Yeah, it's fair. It's true.
I know, right? But I'm going to pick a couple, because I want to kind of hone in on a few things here, which essentially is, and with any podcast we do, what can people take from this and implement new? Yeah. And so, I've got to ask, though, when it came to the survey and the research, the research that you've done, first of all, tell us a bit about that research. How was it conducted? Where was it conducted? With who was it conducted? And what specifically were you trying to find from that, and what came out of that? I mean, we'll dive into what some of that research was in a minute, but I'm curious to know why the generational research and how you went about gathering that information.
The real impetus behind it was actually what I think a lot of your listeners are probably feeling themselves, is that the things that I used to do to achieve success in this industry, or to achieve results, successful or not, just weren't working anymore. They just weren't. And they worked for 15 years, right? And then all of a sudden they weren't. And I talked to other people who I thought were sort of smart and I thought were sort of good, and it wasn't working for them either. And so I started to think, well, gosh, if it's not me, because I've got a healthy ego, I'm pretty sure it's not me, right? Then what could it be? And so that sort of came together with this intersection of some Gen Z research. And I thought, well, gosh, maybe we just need to educate ourselves. So I started out doing the research to actually just learn more, to get smarter as a human, as a thinker in this industry. If I believed that I could help influence the direction of this channel, then for heaven's sakes, I certainly needed to look beyond the scope of my own experience. And that's why I decided to do the research. So we invested in actually 2 separate studies done 1 year apart, one in the United States, one in Europe, and we're about to do an Asian study as well, which will include Australia as well. Although the results, I don't know, I think you have listeners all over the globe, but the results from Europe and US have an 80% correlation to Australia specifically. So the results apply to all markets really, except Asia at this point. So what we set out to do, and we conducted them with the Center for Generational Kinetics, which is the research company that Jason Dorsey partners with. And they were statistically significant studies. So we did them to mirror the census, the 2020 census in the US and in Europe. And so we can conclusively say all Americans and all Europeans from the size of the study. So it was really important to me that this wasn't a survey. This wasn't like, I asked 10 of my friends. And the problem is a lot of the industry we get, a lot of the research we get in our industry, as you know, and as field leaders know too, because it trickles down, is really surveys from people who are already part of direct selling companies. Yeah. So, right, like agencies will come and say, hey, can we survey your field? And so we ask people who are already immersed. I wanted to go out and talk to people who were not involved in our channel, had not yet made the decision. They were thinking about it. What did they think? The intent of the study was to determine American and Europeans' perception of the channel, right? What were their decision criteria when making a decision? What are the obstacles that they felt that we needed to overcome? if they joined, how did they want to be communicated with, trained, onboarded? What incentives would work for them that were inspiring to do more, and how much money was worth it, right? What were the income amounts? That was my biggest surprise of the entire study, that one. We can come back to that. How much money made it worth it to stay in the channel? Because I promise you, anybody listening to this right now who's been doing this longer than 5 or 10 years, that number is way lower than your number is. Promise.
Wow.
Really. Okay. And then the role of leadership and team building that we've already touched on. That was really what we were trying to understand from the study. And it took about 7 months, 8 months to do the study, to source the participants. It was a combination of emails and phone calls and follow-up interviews. And so it was a very thorough, very comprehensive study, because we wanted to be able to use it definitively and declaratively. And that's actually been the application. And we're seeing field leaders start to take some very specific things away, put it into action, see results in their sponsoring, see results in retention, see results in their team building and leadership. And that was sort of the goal ultimately, was how do we put it in action for people?
Yeah, wow. So off the back of that, you said that there was some surprising results that came back. What were some of those things that really surprised you? You saw them come in, you're like, wow, that is not what I was expecting them to say.
Yeah. So let me give you one of the underlying behavioral elements that surfaced, and then that leads to some of the surprising things that we had. So at the heart of younger millennials and Gen Z in particular, there was a common thread of insecurity, generally feeling ill-equipped and ill-prepared to be successful in whatever it is they choose to do. Sort of felt that they missed somewhere along the way life skills that were required to be successful. And obviously, when we talk in stereotypes, we're talking about generalizations. There are exceptions, of course, because every human on the planet is different. But generally speaking, that was a common thread that came across. So how that manifested itself in surprise revelations was two things. One, they really, really want a physical starter kit and a written roadmap for success. They want something they can look at physically on a paper, like old-fashioned paper, and they want a box of stuff that they get that they can unbox. Partly they want it because they want to show that on social, but mostly they want it because it feels tangible to them, and it gives them confidence in the products that they have, in what it is that they're doing, and that it's something real to sort of get their hands around. And as companies left, right, and sideways were going to digital kits, digital kits, digital kits, digital kits, this was a huge swing the other way that said,
wow. They're like, give me something physical. I don't want it to be digital. I love
give me something physical. Second big thing, I'm going to give 3. Sorry, is 3 okay? So
you can give 3. That's right. You can give 4 if you want to.
Second big thing.
I'm listening intently.
The second big thing was how they wanted to be onboarded. Okay. So one of the things we probed deeply, we don't have enough time to go into all the nuances around it, was around communication styles. What kind of communication they want for different things. They want to be texted for certain things, DM'd for others, emailed for others, and they want to go on YouTube for others. And they do not do the blanket approach, right? Don't just put it everywhere in hopes that you'll find it somewhere. That's no bueno, right? But what we learned about onboarding and training, how to get started, they want that to be in person. Now, they define in person differently than I do. This would be in person for them, right? I'm in the US, you're in Australia, we're on a video, your happy faces next to mine.
This is in person as it gets for a lot of them. I get that. Yeah.
This is in person. Yeah. But as opposed to, don't text me 15 things to do to get started. I don't want to learn on my own. I don't want that. You can supplement with that, but what I really want is this, because I'm insecure, and you're going to give me that confidence. The worst thing you could do to me, however, is put me in a video class like this with 10 other people that are in my same stage.
Also, one-to-one.
One-to-one. Because I don't want to look stupid.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm not going to, if you put me in a group with other people, that is way foreign territory. I don't know them. I don't know what they think of me. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know what to ask. Don't ask me if I have questions. Like, I will shut down, right? This, I will open up. I'm comfortable with this. You're gonna ask me a question. I'm gonna give you an answer. I'm gonna ask you a question. You're gonna give me an answer. One-on-one. Yeah. That was the second biggest thing. And then the third big surprise, I've already alluded, was how much money makes it worth it.
Yeah.
Right? that was radically different across generations. So if you're a Gen Xer and above, it's $1,000 or more a month. That's the amount of money that makes it worth it. Okay. And again, I've given this speech. If the number doesn't have a comma in it, it's not a big enough number. I get it. I'm clearly in that group, right? Younger millennials, Gen Z, 200, and I'm using US dollars so you can convert, 250 US dollars to $499. That's the sweet spot. That's the sweet spot. And not just is my number lower, if you start talking to me about $1,000 a month, my scam radar, which is highly tuned, just went off like crazy. So not only do I not think it's possible, I now think this is a nonsense scam and I'm not going to listen to you anymore.
Wow. So going too far the other way and making those promises is actually completely turning them off because it's now not doable.
Exactly.
And
isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
I know. So it's like just in talking about, and our industry as a whole wants to talk about how you can earn six-figure income, all the things. No, stop. Multiple income stream, adding a few $100s a month. That's what they're going for. Now, I'm not saying eventually you can't talk to them about a bigger vision and whatever it is. Fine. We're talking about the prospecting conversation, the join conversation. It's a small number.
Is the income still the driving force that gets them in, or is there something else that they're coming in for that they want to come in for? What's the most important thing to them?
Income.
It's income, but it's just a smaller income.
It's just a smaller income because, again, what they're looking for are multiple income streams. Remember, this is the generation right now that is like streaming themselves getting laid off on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've been sucked into those. I watched some woman all day. She had the countdown to when she was going to get fired. And I'm like, that is mortifying. I'm not even sure I'd tell my husband if that happened to me. And you're just like broadcasting it live, right? So this fundamental insecurity of income is the rallying cry. And so how they win at life, right? How my generation was talking about winning at life was being able to get rid of the 9-to-5, that you weren't chained to that job, right? Yeah. That was sort of the common enemy, was the job. That's not it anymore. They're so far past that. Whatever. Now, the common enemy is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't be tied to one income source. You need to have multiple income sources. So they're doing it for the income. Now, do they also need to have a company that shares their own values? Absolutely. That's a high number 2. They have to have a company that, contributes to a cause they believe in. Yes, high number 3. All those things. Yeah. But the primary is still income. Absolutely.
Wow. So I've got to talk about the elephant in the room here for a little second. If their primary motivator is income and we can't talk about income, how are we having that conversation with this particular generation? Yeah. And more to that, you mentioned incentives and what incentivizes them. How does that correlate, or is that a different conversation? Are we speaking more about some of the other things that they gain from the industry? How do we have this conversation in an open way, in a compliant way that's actually drawing these people in and having them go, oh my gosh, I want to know more. This sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was actually just this afternoon speaking to a group of CEOs at the Direct Selling University that's being held here in Dallas right now. And we were talking about this very, very topic. And it's actually interesting in that because they're actually caring about less income, it makes our ability to talk about the income we can provide much easier and much more compliant. It's not that we can't talk about income. It's that we have to be realistic and honest about the kind of income that you can make. And so the FTC or whatever governing body you have in whatever country you're in, it's not that you can never say that you can earn commission by selling these products. Of course you can. That is a true statement. When we characterize it as additional supplemental income to help your family, that's a very low bar. And it fits with what they're looking for. So it actually opens up the ability to have these conversations in a much more compliant way, which is, again, good for everybody. Second to that, however, of course they care about the product, right? They want to make the money, right? But it then becomes about the product. And so the conversations are all about, try this product. It's amazing. I love it. It's changed my life. I'm going to do a get ready with me. I'm going to share with you what it is. Click below. Right. So it of course it has to start with the product, right? Of course. And then, but again, it's not uncompliant to talk about being able to make income from a product. That's not compliant. It's just about saying, you can retire your husband and quit your job and a residual income and all the stuff that just that's the stuff. And not only is it not compliant and we shouldn't do it and it's wrong and bad and awful, but it's also not what they want. So yay for everybody.
So let's talk a little bit then about loyalty. Because I think there's this assumption that loyalty has changed dramatically. Would that be true, or has it just shifted? Where, how are they? Because, we see, again, older generations, many of them have been with the same company for 20, 30 odd years and continue to stick around. How is that different now?
Yeah, the way I address this is really putting out the difference between brand loyalty and brand monogamy. Mm-hmm. So brand loyalty is not dead at all. Brand loyalty is very real. People will stick with brands. Younger generations will stick with brands that they believe in, with companies they support that continue to do good things for their health, their body, their skin, their life, whatever. Yeah. Great. Brand loyalty is there. The idea that I'm going to use 27 products from one company before noon every day is done, right? Yeah. Like the idea that anyone would have every single piece of makeup and skincare that is on their face from one company, which we all used to do and we all used to talk about and we all used to be out there with it, right? Is those days are gone. Now, companies view that as, where's the loyalty, right? Where did loyalty go? It's not about loyalty. It's about monogamy. Right. Yeah. And so we cannot expect, not only can we not expect brand monogamy, we actually should encourage not having it. Right. Because with the opposite of brand monogamy is authenticity. And authenticity is what adds credibility. It's what adds followers. It's what generates sales and revenue for everybody. Yeah. Right. So that's the trade off there. So I think we confuse the word loyalty in that conversation with monogamy.
So what about loyalty with the business itself? Because I know that one of the very, very common rules that any direct selling company would have had, and I've seen a big shift in this in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, but still many companies are sticking with that philosophy that you can't progress in the company past a certain point if you are a distributor of multiple direct selling companies. How do you think that's changed? Do you think that with these younger generations, they want to be able to have multiple incomes from multiple companies and be able to sell multiple different brands? Or do you think, no, they can still be loyal to one company and stick around for a long time?
Yeah, I don't even think it's a question. I think it's table stakes that they have multiple brands that they represent and earn income from multiple places. And I think that not only from a regulatory standpoint is that the right thing to do for all kinds of employment law reasons and a million other things. It's a whole other podcast. But
there's like 10 within this one conversation,
right. But exactly. That's a whole other one. But not only for those reasons, but it's just again, it comes back to authenticity, right? And so if what I'm trying to do is add additional income streams to my family or my living situation, right? Then why would I want to partner with a company who is telling me, no, you can't do that? The only brand, you can use all the products you want, but the only one that you can monetize in any way is mine. Yeah. And if you even so much as try to monetize the fact that you like this other product, then you can no longer sell my product. I mean, again, I've written the policies, I've given the policies, I've trained the policies. I get it. And I get how hard it is to hear that. But part of my distance now I can say very clearly, those policies need to go away. They're not going to be a thing in 10 years by any stretch. And I don't think they're going to be a thing in 2 years. I think it's
I think it's actually a really beautiful thing to hear, because it just says collaboration to me. And we're in an industry that is very, very family orientated. It's very collaborative. And I think what it's doing is opening up those borders and saying, hey, let's work together. I've actually seen something really beautiful happen in the US with a couple of companies that I love very, very dearly. This tends to happen a little bit more with owner-operator, founder situations, but a couple of companies that have come together that might have been perceived as being competitors have said, let's collaborate and create some products that actually use both of our brands together and sell them within both companies. And I think what that says is this industry is entering a new stage now of let's work together for the greater good. Yeah. And let's not, I think there's this assumption made by the field that we all need to compete. And, particularly in, we hear this a little bit from time to time because we've got obviously a membership base of people from lots of different companies. Occasionally you get the question, oh, is that dangerous? Because they're all competing with each other. And no, it's not, because, with a rising tide, you float all ships, right? So it's working together to make this industry something really amazing. And I think actually this generation is creating a situation now with, like what you've just said, where let's get more of them, selling more products, working for more companies, and we're seeing a little bit more of that collaboration happening. I think that's really great.
I think we are, but not, and all that to say, it's not without problems, right? It definitely, and not handled well, you do end up sometimes with leaders who, you maybe fall out of favor with your company, or you get frustrated with your company, and then all of a sudden this policy of you get to be in more than one company all of a sudden feels really scary because they have some place to go, and so it's not that it's not without problems and not without merit to sort of make the argument or have the fear of that. But I think in this day and age, it truly is just a reality. I talked with a CEO the other day who they started seeing that their leaders were in multiple brands, right? It was fine with their policies. It was not a violation of policy. Well, they started calling leaders to congratulate them when they hit rank advancements in other companies because they saw it on social.
Ooh. Yeah.
What's fascinating is how much that tethered that person emotionally to this company.
Wow.
Because it sent a message that said, I care about you even more than I care about your utility to me.
Yep.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yep.
I'm not saying everybody can and should do that. Yeah.
I think there's one of the things that I'm noticing about this younger generation is the need to be seen. Would that be fair to say that there's this need to be seen and noticed?
Yeah.
And that really comes back to that. It's you're being seen. We see you. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? And again, I'm not even so sure I'm recommending it to everyone. I just thought it was really fascinating. Yeah.
I love it. I do love it, but I think it's very clever.
I do. I just thought it was clever. That's right.
But I want to talk just quickly about language for a minute, because one of the things you spoke about at the Direct Selling Australia conference was the language shift and some of those words that I hate saying older generations. Isn't it another way? Mature, more
You're
mature.
not. You can say me. It's okay.
Can we need to come up with a cooler name for this, but we'll work on that. In the meantime, our generations use certain language. We don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But to them, it's sending off alarm bells and actually having them turn around and go, I don't want to borrow that. What is some of that language? Yeah. What are some of the words that we need to avoid using now?
The ones that I've been highlighting recently are, the first one is really around this idea of how you come to be a part of an organization. And it has to do with the word join. Mm-hmm. And I will say that the younger millennials and Gen Zs are not joiners. They do not want to join you. They don't want to join your team. They don't want to join your cause. They don't want to join your movement. They don't want to join your Facebook group. They don't have Facebook. So no, they don't want to join, right? And it's funny, when I talk to direct selling executives about this, they'll go, yeah, that's totally true. And then I'm like, well, pull up your homepage on your phone and see how many of you have a great big join now button, right? And like they all do, right? So, and field leaders in particular, they talk about that a lot. Join now, join today, join my team. And so other language that tested better was this idea of getting started. Okay. Yep. So they're happy to get started. They even could get started now. They could get started today. They could get started soon. They're happy to get started, and just shifting that language from join, which is like, wait a minute, I'm then going to be a part of something's going to be expected of me.
Yep.
I don't want to join, like, no, but get started. Sure.
Yeah. Right? Wow. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another one that we use a lot is sponsor.
Yeah.
Right. And
I think, this is an interesting one. Sorry, you continue. I want to hear this.
This one's hard because it just trips off our tongue. I mean, we give top sponsoring awards. We do sponsoring, you know, and they're definitely, this generation feels like, I I'm not in a 12-step program that requires a sponsor of any kind. Like, I don't need that. I don't understand why I need that. Heaven's sakes, I certainly don't want an upline. I don't even know what that is, let alone want one, right? Like, I don't.
Yeah.
And then you want me to be one? You want me to be a sponsor and be an upline? No, I don't want any part of it, right? Run, right? So that sort of now, but what's interesting is when I talked about the research and I talked about what they're looking for, they desperately want a trusted guide, somebody to walk with them every step of the way. Yes, that's what you can be, right? Other language that tested well was mentor. Now, the interesting thing about mentor is they wanted to have one, but they never thought they could be one.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
to the extent that our industry relies on duplication, that one's not going to work. So my recommendation, my training now is to use guide as what you call yourself. Like, I'll be here to guide you every step of the way, right?
Yep.
And if you're part of a system in a company, and a lot of us still are, where you use that sort of 3-way call or the connect with your upline to, have the conversation, that's where you can use the word mentor. So if somebody's sort of on the fence, you can say, I'd love for you to get started today, but if you're not quite ready, just so you know, I will be here to guide you every step of the way, but I'd love for you to chat with my mentor. She has been an absolutely positive influence in my life. She was my guide. She helped me every step of the way and has now become so much more. And I'd love for you to hear from her.
Yeah.
Right. So that then becomes, I've positioned it. She's a mentor. I'm not going to have to be one, so I can go listen to one. Mm-hmm. Guide seems like I could be that if you taught me enough, right? No problem. And none of it feels cringy and jargony and gross.
Yep. Wow. Okay. So a lot of that old school jargon that we are just programmed to use because it's what we've been using for many years, we need to really start rethinking that. Okay, we've got some words here. I want to just, because again, I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but I'm very aware of the time, and there is a very important question I have for you now, which relates to social media. Now, you made a comment before, and you've got young kids, I've got teenagers. So we're watching, I'm very conflicted about this one. We're watching the generations, we're seeing behaviors, and we're watching social media. My question is this. You made a comment, you sort of slipped that in there just before about Facebook. They don't have it. Yeah. Now, I know, and this has been really interesting to watch, I know that my teenagers will never admit to having Facebook. They don't talk about it. They don't brag about it in any way. They don't openly use it. It's become this undercover thing that I know they have and I know they use because they will comment on something they saw me put up. That being said, what are you seeing from the research that you're doing? Changes around how they're using social media. What platforms are they using? And how are they using those platforms? Because I think what we're observing may be different to what they're admitting to in some ways.
Yeah, I think in some ways that's true. I mean, my experience is a little bit different. I have a 19 and a 16-year-old. I know neither one of them have a Facebook. But they're not actually super engaged in social either. I'm so, in my heart, I'm so happy.
I would be very happy about that too.
for all the reasons.
I'm like, how many zombies do we have today? Okay. Good.
Yeah. So I think the way we focused our research on this topic in particular was mostly around where you're going to get information to make your decision to join. Yeah. And then where are you willing to go to be where information might be coming to you? Okay. Yep. So what we saw in terms of where they go to find information, just like Amazon is now the go-to search engine for product legitimacy. It's not Google anymore. You go to Amazon. If you see a brand, you see a product, that's where you go, right? Yeah. For the business opportunity, it's YouTube. Hands down, it's YouTube. Okay. Yeah, so make sure you as a field leader have a YouTube channel. You've got your YouTube set up, and we advise companies all day long, clean up your YouTube. Okay. Like that's where they're going to hear stories, testimonials, get their information. That's where that is, to learn about the business, right? When you talk about where they're willing to go to get information and updates, Instagram and Reels, they will absolutely follow, and that's where they live. They don't want it. They're into Snapchat and do Snap all day long, and TikTok. Yes. But don't necessarily Snap. They don't want anything to do with on business. there.
Yeah.
Stay far away. That's just for me and my friends, right? That's not anything at all.
Yeah, they are having conversations on Snapchat. I'm watching them doing this too, by the way, and it's just like, I'll say to them, do you have X's phone number? Can you check with them if they're available this weekend? I've got them on Snap. Okay. Right.
I never have felt so old as when I learned about Snap. I have to tell you, like, into this moment, I don't even understand. You do what now?
I choose not to, like, social media, sure, but I don't find it very social. Okay.
That aside, I think we both just landed in the old category.
Constantly walking around taking the ugliest photos of whatever they're doing or themselves just to get what do they call it?
Yeah, I know. Anyway, now we're making it worse.
A streak. They have to get a streak.
Sam, we're making it worse. We need to stop talking about Snap. Okay, so
shut up. Keep going.
What they do want is
not again.
What they do want, please get me back to my comfort zone so I can sound like I know what I'm doing. For the love of everything.
Nobody in our generation understands that. Okay,
yeah. No, great. Younger millennials will absolutely come to Facebook for information. They are fine with that. They will be part of a private group. They will engage. They'll even go onto your lives and do it, like 100%. Gen Zs, 14% indicated that they would be willing to get a Facebook page if it meant that was the only way they could communicate with a brand. 14.
Wow.
That's not very many.
No.
So we just got to think about that in terms of where we come to them with information.
Yeah. So Instagram Reels, really big place to be for information. What about TikTok? Did that come up?
Yeah, TikTok came up. It was sort of right in the middle. It was a little lower than Instagram. And it was pretty mixed. It was more like I do that for entertainment versus I want to go there for anything related to my work or my income. It was about half and half. So I haven't totally figured. And TikTok's got, it's super hard to sell things on TikTok. Like I don't think anybody's quite figured that out or its place in it from a corporate standpoint. As a field leader, you definitely need to be on TikTok, and that's where you need to be sort of engaging with your content, of course.
Yeah, and I think there's also that fear as well with TikTok at the moment that we don't really know where that sits based on your elections and is it going to be around in a year? Is it, and so again, that sort of brings up that whole don't put all eggs in one basket because you don't want to have it gone tomorrow and your business goes with it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the platforms, we've talked about the communication, we've talked about what incentivizes them to join the industry. Just last question before I get to the fun ones here, my favorite questions of every interview. I just want to know if you've got somebody right now who, like your eye, is running a business and they want to attract more of these younger generation in. They're thinking, I don't know that I necessarily understand this way of thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I want to get at. What can you do? Do you have to understand it, or what can they do? What are some really simple steps that they can take to be more attractive to those younger generations right now to be able to bring them into their teams?
Yeah, I think three things. One, evidently I like three things. I don't know. I've done that too many times now. I think the first thing is sort of stop what I call the grouchy old man syndrome. Like, quit thinking about the young generations as if all of the negative stereotypes are just wrong. Like, quit thinking about them like you know how to do it right and they're doing it all wrong and they don't have the right values, they don't have the right work ethic, and then and I had to learn this as a parent, right? I mean, my 19-year-old comes in, she was 17 at the time, but still, she was working. She was worked from school from home, right? And I come in and she's sitting on the sofa and she's crocheting. And I'm like, I thought you were doing school. What's going on? She's like, Mom, I just needed to take an afternoon and I just needed a me moment. Right? Now, it's easy for me to be a grouchy old man, right? And be like, what are you talking about?
I was caught up on crocheting, but you skipped over that real quick.
Well, but it's a whole thing. It's all retro, that whole retro skill thing.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah. Maybe it's not in Australia yet.
Yeah, maybe not yet. So anyway, I'm like, my reaction in my mind is like, it's Tuesday afternoon. What do you mean me time? There's no me time. Like, what are you talking about? But instead, because I try to practice what I preach, I was like, well, tell me about that. Tell me why you think that that's, what's going on, right? And then it became this very legitimate conversation about anxiety she was having about a test the next day and unsure how to process it and whatever. So again, and the inclination is to think that generation is doing it wrong. I actually think they're going to figure it out way better than all of us Gen Xers, and they're going to have infinitely happier lives. Like, that is what I believe without a doubt. And so I've chosen to approach, and so my advice to all field leaders is approach it with open-mindedness and curiosity, right? So when you get rejected, so that's the first thing, right? And I'll show how that manifests in 1 second. Second thing is really just try to, you don't have to understand it. You don't have to be perfect, and you shouldn't try to be them. You should be you. What's important to you is important to you, and that's okay.
Don't try. So my kids are
don't try to do like what we did with, don't talk about Snap. Like, no.
Don't try and be cool like us. You will fail immediately and we'll see straight through it. Yeah. Okay.
Don't do that. And we're not even asking you to, and it's not even that what you did was wrong. It's just different today. So just be okay with it being different, right? So that, and then third, try different language. Use some of the techniques that we're sharing here today. Instead of saying, I have a great business opportunity, I'd love for you to join my team today, it's half off. You can get rid of that 9 to 5, right? Like, instead of that, say, hey, you know what? I'd love to help you get started adding an additional income stream to your family. You can get started anytime that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Very different, right?
Yes.
Start that language. See what works. When you get a no, okay, this is where these come into play. When you get a no, instead of harumphing and deciding that you're a failure and nobody wants it, or they don't want to work anymore, or Heather was wrong, or whatever the things are, right? Whatever you decide, take a beat and ask some questions and say that I completely and totally respect the fact this is not for you right now. One of the things I'm trying to do as I'm growing my business is to learn more about how to make this opportunity appealing to the next generation. Could I just ask you what it is about it that doesn't feel right? I'm not asking you to change your mind. I don't want you to change your mind. I completely respect it's not for you, but I'm curious.
Yep.
And then actually listen. And then actually listen. Like, actually, don't listen to refute, listen to learn.
Yeah, don't hear objections you need to overcome. Yeah.
Right. And don't. Like, that whole day of, like, say, if you say this, this is what you say. No. They don't want to be convinced.
Yeah.
No one ever did, really. But we got a lot of training hours out of it. But so that's my advice. Try to keep an open mind and be and open your mind this much so they might actually know a better way. Like, it's okay. Like, fine, right? Learn, because you thought you had a better way for your parents and you were probably right. So maybe they are. So open mind, try the language. Don't be afraid to try different things. You don't have to change who you are. Just relate in a different way. And then be curious when it doesn't go right and try to learn. That's all.
Yeah, wow. So much in all of that, Heather. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible knowledge with us. I've got a few fun questions here I want to ask you really quickly. First of all, what is your favorite book for us to add to our accelerator book list?
Okay, so you actually, and I'm so grateful you did. For everybody, I did get a heads up on the questions. However, I didn't put a lot of time into it. And favorite book is incredibly hard for a voracious reader. Like, you can't pick one. Like, that's impossible.
It actually causes anxiety in me when people ask me this question.
Like, I'm going to identify every bit of my identity around this one book. I'm going to give you, there's like 40. But the one I'm going to share with you, it's called Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's an old book. He did a reprint for the digital age. It's a productivity book. So if you're not a productivity nerd, by all means, skip over it. It was totally transformational in my professional life. I applied to my personal life. It's how I managed to keep any sense of organization around anything going on in my life. And I just love the principle at play about how the mind works and processes information. That's it. That's my
I love it. I love it.
It's not my favorite book ever, but it's my one that I'm going to give you today. How about that?
All right. I love it. I should rephrase that question, shouldn't I? What's your one of your favorite books? But anyway, I'm here to serve. So next question, if you could have a superpower, any superpower, what would it be and why?
Again, super hard question. As a kid, I would always say invisibility. And I think that's just because I always wanted a seat at every single table, and I wanted to be able to be in conversations wherever they were happening and however they were happening. And I think I'm probably just going to stick with that one for right now. I think that you can learn so much from being able to observe situations when you're not actually inserting yourself and affecting the outcome of that. And I think that would be super interesting to learn in an environment where you weren't part of that equation and you could actually just absorb what was happening around you without having everyone else sort of react to you in that environment. So I'm going to stick with that one for now.
I think that says a lot, though. I think it's a really good reminder that sometimes we possibly need to remove ourselves a little bit more. We're so willing, like we want to be a part of everything and we want our opinion and our thoughts to be heard, but we're not learning, we're not discovering, we're not letting others feel seen and heard by doing that. I think there's a lot to be said for actually being better at listening.
For my personality type, that's really hard. Like, I don't understand when people don't have opinions. Like, is your brain not working? What's wrong? Like, you can't form a thought? What's going on with you? Right. So I'm that kind of personality. And
I feel like having dinner with you would be absolutely sensational.
Well, that's a very nice thing to say, but
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So that's what I'll stick with.
Okay. Favorite quote?
Okay. So I had this one on my wall forever. And I promise you, no one has given you this quote before. It's actually sourced in two places. I first read it in A Room with a View, the novel, but it's sourced to Henry David Thoreau, and it's mistrust all enterprises that require new clothes.
Mistrust
all enterprises that require new clothes. Now, the reason I like it is because it not only it's sort of how I like to show up in the world, because like if you've got to put on airs, then why do you want to be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
But that's the literal meaning. But I think the figurative is actually even more interesting. So if you're going into a situation or an environment or a decision, and it's requiring you to change who you are in any way, then I think it's just beware. And I think the original quote might just be beware of. I think that's the original beware of, and then it was changed to mistrust. But I think it's just a good reminder to be true to who you are. I just think it's expressed in a very interesting way. And so I like the thought behind it.
Such a good one. I love that. I have not heard that quote before, but I'm stealing that one. I'm throwing that on my wall because I think there's a lot to be said for that. And again, in the conversation that we're having today, one of the key things, one of the key trainings, and you heard me talk about this at the DSA conference, that we need to do more of is getting back to who we are and being not afraid to be that person, because that's what people want to see online. And I think too, you said this as well, those younger generations want to see the truth of who we are, not a fake version of that.
Yep.
They want to see real because they've seen fake. They've seen probably more fake than we have.
Yep.
And I think there's so much to that. So that's a brilliant one. I love it. I'm stealing it. Last question, by far my favorite. Always fascinated to hear the response to this one. If you could go back in time and whisper one thing to your past self, what would that be?
It has to do a little with the things I've shared that sort of common through my book and my superpower and my quote. And it's maybe there was a great point in my career when I realized that I didn't need to be in the room. I didn't need to be in every conversation. I could relax a little bit and sort of have more confidence in sitting back and listening and not being the first one to talk, not being the first one with the answer. And so I think if I could go back, I would probably encourage myself to learn that a little bit sooner than I did. I was probably in my late 30s before I really got to that place where I was super comfortable with being like, do you need to be in this meeting? No, I do not. I do not need to be. Go for it, right? Whereas before I was a little eager to just be in everything. And I think it came from an okay place, but I think it also caused a little bit of I was probably too interested in showing what I knew instead of learning what I could from others. And I'd like to have a few more years under my belt of having the wisdom that I had when I realized that you actually do learn more from listening.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I go back.
said for that. And I think, part of the reason that we feel we need to be in every room is because we need to feel that we're needed and
Yes.
important, right?
Yes.
So there's almost a confidence and a courage that comes with saying, I don't need to be in every room, because that says I am still needed and I'm still important. I just don't need to have my finger in every pie to be that. I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, Heather, this has been such an honor chatting with you today. Like I said, man, oh man, so many more rabbit holes we could have gone down today. And I think, every question I asked, we probably could have just had a podcast on that one thing. But I really want to thank you for sharing so openly your knowledge with us. I think this generational shift that we're seeing, and I'm sure this is not the first time in history that this statement's been said, but it absolutely is. It's a big shift. It is a big shift for our industry, but it's also, I think, very confusing for a lot of people right now. And one of the things that you said that really is stuck with me is changing the way we think about the younger generations and not seeing it as bad, as us versus them, as black and white, as we've got it right, they've got it wrong. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And you've really opened my eyes today as well to some of those behaviors and where they're coming from. And I just want to thank you so much for jumping in and chatting with me about this today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. You're a brilliant interviewer. The time flew by. I feel like I could talk to you all day. Thank you for doing it.
Awesome. Thank you again. And thanks, of course, to our beautiful listeners for tuning in. My one thing for you is I want you to have one thing. So please, whatever you do, take from this interview something that you can implement or use and go and do it within the next 24 hours. Don't just let this be another opportunity to gain knowledge. Let this be an opportunity for you to make a shift in your business. So thanks again for choosing to spend this time with us and for listening on in. It's been great to have you, and we'll see you on the podcast again next week. That's it from us. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. If you love listening and you found that this was helpful for your direct selling business, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out the recommended video that's popped up on your screen right here. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.